You and your friend decide you want to figure out who's better at rock, paper, scissors. You win the first game, but Johnny thinks that one game isn't enough to determine who the better player is. So, you run a best of 3, and this time, Johnny comes out on top. Unconvinced, you challenge him to a best of 1,000. You really want to find out who the better player is, and well, you weren't really doing anything that day anyways. After a long and grueling set, you finally emerge as the victor. Johnny, fueled by salt, says something like, "Okay, you may be better than me, but you're definitely not the best in the neighborhood." Eager to prove him wrong, you let him invite the rest of the neighborhood over to settle this. But you quickly start to realize that a whole neighborhood doesn't really fit in your living room. Also, your dad has work early tomorrow morning, and what if people just leave when they get knocked out? How do you run this tournament so that the competition is fair, your dad can get some sleep, and that people stick around long enough to see who wins? When deciding on competitive formats for a game, there are 3 major parties we need to consider: the player, the organizer, and the viewer. The player is typically most interested in competitive integrity, or in other words, a fair tournament. If they are the best team, then they should win. This typically means giving them multiple games per set so that a fluke loss doesn't hurt them in the grand scheme. Each viewer may want different outcomes in a given event, but they typically want to see a few things consistently. They want to see their favorite team as much as possible, usually in the form of second chances. They also want a compelling story to follow, which means avoiding rematches unless it's a final battle. The organizers have the hardest jobs in deciding on a competitive format because their costs are directly tied to the ambition of their event. They have to make sure that not only the players and viewers are happy, but also make sure that their staff is happy. This typically means prioritizing the format that avoids massively long workdays so as to stay within the budget of the event. So, what does this really look like? Well, that depends on the game. We might be able to smoothly run a 128-person double elimination RPS bracket in a single day, but in a game like Counter-Strike, that format may not work as well. Games in CS can last upwards of 45 minutes to an hour, making our tournament span way too long. Additionally, by having such high amount of entrants, we likely have a very high skill disparity between the best teams and the worst teams, making the opening matches seem like pub stomps. A game like Counter-Strike typically performs better with smaller brackets, usually prefaced by some form of online qualifier to weed out the weaker teams. Matches are also spread out over the course of a few weeks at important junctures of the bracket, which requires more coordination and cost on the organizer's end, but can result in a better player and viewer experience. On the other end of the spectrum, a game like Super Smash Bros. Melee may not perform as well in a bracket like this. Like many fighting games, a lot of the costs of the event are subsidized by players' entry fee, so in this ecosystem, more entrants are actually encouraged. And since games don't run nearly as long, and viewers are typically only interested in their favorite players or newer talent, tournaments can have 1,000-person brackets over the course of 3 days by running multiple matches at the same time. A really good event will be an amazing player and viewer experience, but due to the ambitious scale, these events can be a massive strain on the organizers, where tournament costs may barely break even, if at all. So where does that put a game like League of Legends? From an organizer perspective, League suffers from some of the similar issues we see with Counter-Strike. Time. Games can last upwards of an hour, so as a result, Riot has to make a difficult decision on how to split those allotted games up while still keeping everyone happy. And in fact, Riot recently announced new changes to both their League and playoff formats to try and address some of these issues. In the old LCS format, each team plays 2 BO1 matches over the course of a weekend. The new LCS format is mostly similar, but the games have been spread out over 3 days instead of 2. Players are probably not thrilled about the best of ones, but by splitting the games up like this, viewers don't have to commit as much time to watch an entire day of LCS. Additionally, the 2 matches played on Monday can now be set up to generate some more hype, rivalries, or matches with important bracket implications. We really start to see the differences when we compare the old playoff brackets with the new. The most notable difference is the single versus double elimination format. This means that most qualifying teams, aside from the bottom 2 seeds, will have 2 chances, which, as we know, makes players happy, and should make viewers happy as they get to see more of their favorite team. The implications for each match are also much more significant, as the top 3 teams qualify for Worlds, whereas in old playoff brackets, only the winner of the summer split was guaranteed a spot. Overall, it seems like Riot is trying to make moves towards making the viewer experience better, while increasing a sense of fairness for players during playoffs. Though this puts more cost on the organizer, Riot is willing to take the risk if the payoff is worth it. The question remains, did they get the balance right? That may be more difficult to answer. There will always be a format that makes mostly everyone happy. But at the end of the day, the format you choose is just as much a creative choice about how you want to reflect your brand. The 1,000-person Melee tournaments work from both a cost and story perspective. But what if cost wasn't so much an issue, and you could run an invitational with only the best players? League of Legends players and superfans may want best of 3s, but what if per-team fandom isn't quite there yet, and Riot's priority is developing League's overall fandom in the meantime? Just like our rock, paper, scissors tournament, we have to decide if we really want to prove that we're the best in the neighborhood, or just prove that we're better than Johnny.